Happy Monday morning, table family. It's the first Monday of December. Hard to believe it is the last month of the year of 2025 and our 47th episode of Everybody at the Table. I am stoked, and I'm going to tell you why. Because we've been doing this for 47 episodes. Yes. Consistently having conversations around how we create access for all, and I'm glad to still be here with you. This will be our last two episodes, 47 and 48, for the 2025 season. We're going to take a break at the end of the month and into next month to reset, relax, get our plan together for 2026, schedule some more conversations so that we can kick off the new year ready to go. I am so excited to be back with you. It's Yolanda. It's Monday. That means it's time for another episode of Everybody at the Table. Today, I'm sitting with a mother who happens to be someone very personal to me, who knows this tension very intimately. Phyllis Smith is her name, and she's wrote a book called The Irony of Affliction. And it chronicles her son Kennedy's story on how he spent his formative years in a normal way, right? Just what we raise our kids to be, and who at this time is awaiting a verdict for a crime that he has been charged with. As she's carried her fear, her hope, her anger, her love, and her stamina that only a mother can carry, she has decided to take her story and to write about it. And today, she's blessing us by opening up and being vulnerable on the Everybody at the Table podcast. So please open your hearts and your ears and hear the conversation that she and I have about love and resilience, the quiet suffering we often overlook, and the question at the heart of this podcast: who gets to sit at our tables? Let's get into it. Hello. Good morning to my guest today. My cousin, I'm not going to even pretend like we don't even have relationship. That's because this conversation, you'll feel the intimacy in our conversation because I love this girl down. This is my cousin. If you know anything about my family, we are very close, and cousins are sisters to me. And so though we are blood related through our mothers, we grew up as sisters and we journey life together. We do life together. And I wanted her on this podcast because she's been very bold to share a very difficult time in her life that occurred right after her mother died, which is interesting. And she talks about it in her book, The Irony of Affliction. And it's a story of loss and dealing with compound grief. But what's more interesting about it is a story of being the mother of an incarcerated child. And when we talk about being at the table and everybody being at the table, we have an entire community of people who are either incarcerated or recovering from being incarcerated. And their stories are worth hearing and telling. And many times we hear from them, but we don't hear from their families. And so my cousin Phyllis Smith, or Phyllis Ann is her author name, has decided to share her story, and I wanted to bring her to the table. So good morning, Phyllis. Thank you so much. And I know this isn't an easy conversation for you to have because I've watched you walk through this moment from a distance and up close, and watching your strength and respecting your journey. Times when you needed to be silent, times when you needed to talk, times when you couldn't share everything. And now you've chronicled as much of your story in this book. And I keep mentioning the book because I want y'all to buy it. So I want y'all to buy it because I want you to support this mother from several different perspectives. So let's get into it. So tell us a little bit about Kennedy. I noticed in the book that you don't refer to him by Kennedy, and I thought that was very interesting. Tell me why you decided to refer to him by his full name instead of Kennedy, as we so lovingly call him in our family.
Yes. Well, Kennedy was born Kennedy Tyler Smith.
Hmm.
So I chose to use Tyler because, as you know, and as those readers that have already purchased the book and those that are going to purchase the book, the story still is not over. And since the story is not over yet, I wanted to give him some privacy as to how I was going to tell my side of the story. He's going to have his own story. He has his own story. He's still living it every day. So that's why I chose to call him Tyler. But of course, everybody knows his name. That's why I chose to use Tyler in the book.
Oh, so tell us about Kennedy because I know his story, but I
Hmm.
want the people that are listening to know his story because often with incarcerated people, that's the only part of the story we know,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
that's the part that makes people fearful or makes
Hmm.
people think this person deserved to be incarcerated or they did something horrible.
Hmm.
And incarcerated people have families too, and they have stories before their incarceration. Tell us about your child, your only son. You have two daughters.
Yeah.
Well, you have two sons actually.
Yeah.
This is your birth son. You have an adopted son, but
Hmm.
this is your youngest son.
Hmm. Yeah.
Tell us about Kennedy.
Well, Kennedy was born. When Kennedy was born, myself and his father, we were considered older age. I was 38 and, of course, just blowed out of my mind thinking that, wow, I'm finna have a child. And his father was well into his 40s. So, in my other children, my birth children, including my adopted children, which is also our cousins, were much older than Kennedy. Kennedy, I had four that grew up together, and then there was Kennedy. So Kennedy was like, he was the baby. He was everybody's baby because
Right.
his age difference was so wide from the other children. And so he grew up this little baby. He started off very rough in terms of life. He was 2 pounds when he was born. Came into the world 30 at 30 weeks, so he was 10 weeks early. And that started the ball of spoiling and cuddling and caretaking. So he grew up with all this attention, like none other. Everywhere, Kennedy, 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 Kennedy. We would leave out of Walmart, and before we leave out of Walmart, everybody that was in Walmart said, "Oh, that's Kennedy." So he grew up as this little rumbustious little boy into everything, everything, but very smart and very intelligent, very wise. Wisdom that he grew from his older sibling. Loved church in church. And then he was a teenager. All of a sudden, he was a teenager. And looking back, I would say that, all of us, we live different lives. But he had this life where he gravitated to his peers who was living a little different life than he was living because most of his all of his peers had parents and siblings of the same age,
Hmm.
where he didn't have that. His siblings was so much older and his parents was older. So he started to really want to have friends and siblings that weren't
That
around,
that he can. Okay, I
that
get
he can
that.
identify with.
What's interesting about that, you said that he can identify with. What's interesting
Yes.
about that
Hmm.
is that Kennedy grew up in Gwinnett County, in the suburbs of Gwinnett County,
Hmm.
Georgia. If you know anything about that, like that's like suburban. This isn't the inner city of Chicago where you started. You moved from Chicago
Exactly.
to the suburbs of Atlanta to give your kids a different lifestyle. You are a mother who's educated at the University of Chicago. You're a social worker. You have been a person in this who has supported the system and pulled children out of the system, adopting our cousins to get them out of the system. And so your entire life journey, your education, your work, your personal life has been around creating space for children to thrive. And
Hmm.
here it is, you give Kennedy this community to thrive. So when you say identify, I'm like, what does he identify with? Because everything in his upbringing was very different than what he gravitated towards. So it's interesting that you would say he sought that, because that's not what he saw. He was so. Tell us a little bit about him being a Boy Scout. You had him in church
Oh
camp.
yeah,
It was like this kid was not what he
yeah,
gravitated toward.
yeah. Every program, I've always had the mentality. I started out the year with all my children that pick something for this year, some activity for this year. Whatever you pick, we're gonna make it happen. You have to stay in it through the whole year. You can't get out of it, or through the whole school semester. So Kennedy was in Boy Scout. He was in the church activities. His sports activities included track. Like he started out so early with track and field that he ended up getting going to ESPN sports to compete and competing on different levels with AAU track and field. Academic wise, he was involved with Black Males Mentorship in Gwinnett County, youth group at church, two churches, our church, our family church here in Atlanta, as well as to his peer church, 12 Stones, which is predominantly Caucasian. But he loved it. He loved it. He would call me at work on Wednesdays. Ma, don't forget, don't go to a meeting tonight because we got youth church at 12 Stones tonight. But he loved it. He would get out of there. I couldn't ask him any questions because he's an average teenager. You know, mama can't ask questions. So I would have to peek in on his conversation with his sisters when we got home from church, when I picked him up. And he'll, be in the room. Oh yeah, we had praise and worship. They had the smoke going, and it was just so awesome.
When did you begin to see that shift, where from
In
Kennedy?
the last semester of his sophomore year, his main peers, there was two young men that he gravitated to the most and the closest. And they decided they wanted to be a rap group.
That rap career.
Yeah, they want to be a rap group. So his father and I did not. We had hesitations about these two young men. His father saw more from the male side. Kennedy, they really don't like you. They're using you. They're jealous of you. I see how they look when I come around. So, but of course, anybody that have teenagers, the more you try to pull them away, the closer they get.
Yeah,
So
right,
his
right.
peers became his ears. That's what I say when teenagers do their own thing. The last semester of his sophomore year, which he was crossing over to be 16. So about 15 years old, he was going to be 16 in August. That was when we really started having the lies. Where you been? Oh, I was at the park shooting basketball, and then come to find out, his dad would drop him off at the park for basketball. Well, he would leave the basketball court and then go and to one of their houses, and they doing beats in the basement. And it wasn't so much of the where you was at that time. It was the fact that the lie, the deceptions. So that's when the twist kind of started with me. A lot more of the challenging,
Challenging your authority.
challenging my authority in the house. So school semester started back, and I then started to talk about, well, maybe you need to go live with your father. Just go live with him because he was there 4 days out of the week, 3 days out of the week. But me believing and thinking that this is a time where you really need to be up under
Eat your father.
the
Mhm.
headship of your father. It did not happen that semester, which, of course, hindsight, I really, really wish it had happened that semester because that would have gave him a little bit more footing and a little bit more time.
Walk us through the moment when your life changed, when this culmination of Kennedy choosing differently than how he was raised came to a head.
Woke up to a phone call from Delta Community Credit Union. Wanted to verify some transactions that had occurred in Gary, Indiana. And so I immediately, I didn't have to ask any questions, didn't have to say what, because I knew that Kennedy he was on my bank account. I immediately I knew he was up in Illinois somewhere. So I verified the transactions because I didn't want him to be out there with not having access to funds until I got a chance to talk to him. Called him after I got off the bank. No response. Called his dad. His dad and I both thought he was in Athens because that's what he said he was going to be at. That was the whole day trying to get in contact with them. No response. Calling the parents of the friends that we knew that he possibly was with. They didn't know where their sons was at either. So that was all day Saturday. Sunday, Kennedy called and said that he was on his way home, and I chose not to address the issue over the phone since I had talked to him. He's on his way home, so I'm gonna talk to him face to face. He was coming to my house, and so I said, "Great, good, because I need to talk to you." So he never showed up. The next thing I knew, I was getting a phone call many hours later from one of his friends, and she had overheard that Kennedy and his two other friends were at Gwinnett County Jail. So I immediately started the process of trying to go up to the jail and call the jail and see what's going on. We initially thought that Kennedy had got arrested for driving with no license because he only had his permit and he was driving a vehicle that wasn't his and the vehicle didn't have insurance and he didn't have his license. It kind of sort of took some weight off of me. It was like, okay, well, this is we can deal with this, one more thing, but we can deal with this. Went to bond him out, and they told me that I couldn't bond him out. There was a hold on him from something that occurred in Illinois.
You didn't know that he was in Illinois. You're
I
thinking
suspected that
he's
he had been in Illinois because of the bank had called me on Saturday.
okay.
Fast forward, I couldn't bond him out because they had a hold on him, and no one could tell me what the hold was for. That was on Sunday. On Monday, no one could give me any answers. And so I called a judge in Gwinnett County that was very familiar with Kennedy because Kennedy had did some work with him. And he called Illinois, and although the jurisdictions were different, he could find some stuff out, but he couldn't find everything out. He sent, in conjunction with some information from the Illinois State Patrol,
Mm-hmm.
he also sent one of his colleagues, who is an attorney in Gwinnett County, up to Gwinnett County Jail to have a meeting with Kennedy. And came back that evening, Monday evening, and just only thing he said was, "Mom, I'll call you tomorrow when I get into the office." The judge did. So I said, okay. So he called me on Tuesday, and he said, what I'm going to tell you is that, one, I don't know everything because that's a different jurisdiction. He said, but I will say this. You and Kennedy's father need to hire a top lawyer in Illinois because if you don't, they're going to string Kennedy up.
I know I left you at a cliffhanger. That's intentional so that you come back next week and hear the remainder of the story that Phyllis shares with us about her journey to going from a suburban mom with a teenage son to being a mom who's prayerfully praying that her son will be free really soon because he has been incarcerated pending trial. Thank you all for listening and opening your heart, for hearing her story, hopefully identifying with just the humanity of people as parents wanting the best for their children and what happens when our plan doesn't work out exactly how we planned it. This is the point of this podcast, is to have these tough conversations and really think about how do we bring every voice where it belongs in the common conversation. Until next week, take care, dine well, share your comments, your thoughts, and even your own stories of how you've dealt with someone who is incarcerated.